No
and
problem.
Brian. And Victor, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, so that Brian can get familiar with you. Um,
Sure.
and I must say I'm honored because I have two Paralympians that I'll be speaking to, which is pretty amazing. So congratulations to both of you. And it's hard to believe, Victor, you were this outstanding athlete. But why don't you tell Brian a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So, Brian, I realize you're a Brooklyn boy originally, huh?
Yep, that's me.
All right. Um, so, I'm a born and raised New Yorker, if you can't tell from my voice. Was injured in a bicycle accident in 1994, the year the New York Rangers won the Stanley Cup. Got involved in adaptive sports right away, specifically the sport of sled hockey. 1998, first USA sled hockey team went to Nagano, Japan. I was on that team, and committed to adaptive sports from there. Worked in a nonprofit organization connecting able-bodied sports and disabled sports, specifically working with the NHL, Major League Baseball to sponsor teams, so there's parity between the sports. That's whereabouts where I got involved with Lou, I think. Trying to get a lot of sport at, it was at, where was it, Lou? It was at the Armory, right?
Yep, we first met at the Armory.
Yeah, we met up at the Armory, and I was just trying to get involved in that, and then eventually worked for the Parks Department and did a lot to make parks accessible for people with disabilities, and recruited over to the mayor's office under Bloomberg, and now under de Blasio, I'm the commissioner of the mayor's office for people with disabilities, that we work to make New York City the most accessible city in the world through employment, education, housing, healthcare, technology, and everything the city has to offer, which also includes our parks department and making sure that we're driving adaptive sport. So that's a little bit about me.
And Brian, as both Victor and I looked you up today, there's two things that I found very interesting. One, you're a Brooklyn boy. I don't know how a Brooklyn boy ended up in Jersey, because that normally doesn't happen. We're Brooklyn people through and through. So we do have a Paralympian from New York City and from Brooklyn. So that's how you should, go about talking about yourself, that you're originally from Brooklyn, because it does put a scare into other athletes. So remember that along the way. And the second thing I'm going to bring up a little bit later that I found very interesting about yourself, and I find it very curious, and I'll save that. So why don't you tell Victor a little bit about yourself as well as our audience?
Yeah. So I was born in Brooklyn. I was born in Methodist Hospital. I actually am a quadruplet. So I'm the only boy, 3 girls and myself. We were born a minute apart from each other, but we were born in Brooklyn because my mom used to be she used to work at Methodist Hospital. And so she chose to have us deliver there, but my parents had already moved to New Jersey at the time. So that's why we made the transition to New Jersey. However, every time that I put on a form, they say, where's your birthplace? And I always say Brooklyn, New York. So anytime that I'm at the games or any sort of major international competition, they always say that I'm from Brooklyn. And so I think you're right, Lou, that it does sort of instill a little bit of fear in people when they hear that I'm from New York. So growing up, so when I was 6 days old, my doctor left my umbilical catheter open, which caused me to lose 1/3 of the blood in my body, which caused spinal shock and paralyzed me from the waist below. So I grew up using a wheelchair, but I actually never got involved in sports until I was in high school. For me, growing up, I never really saw there wasn't really any representation of athletes with disabilities. And so I knew that sports sort of existed, but I also wasn't, I really wasn't interested in sports. It really was, I was very content playing video games, and that was sort of something that I liked doing. And then it wasn't until high school, my first day of high school, I went to Notre Dame High School in Lawrenceville, New Jersey, where my high school track coach, Joe McLaughlin, actually came up to me and asked me on the first day of school if I had a broken leg or if I was in my chair permanently. And when I told him that I was in the chair permanently, he said, "Oh, why don't you come out for the track team?" And I kind of looked at him like, "Dude, I just told you I can't walk." And he said, yeah, I know. I've seen other kids with disabilities before at, the local state track meet. Would it be would that be something you want to try and do? And I, not knowing what I was getting into, I said yes. So that's what I did. So my high school actually raised money for my first racing chair, which is a pretty, looking back on it, is an incredible sort of thing that they did, because the Victor, as you're aware, adapted sports equipment is not cheap. And so for this kind of chubby kid who had never done sports at all a day in his life, that was a pretty big investment on their part. And so I started working out with my high school track team. They set me up with a junior program in northern New Jersey, the Children's Specialized Hospital Lightning Mill. And they got me measured for my chair, and they sort of taught me the basics of wheelchair racing, I guess. But I would work out every day with my high school track team. I primarily focused on distance racing because that's what my specialty was. That's what I thought I wanted to do. And so I just started working out. I really had no intention of ever I had no real consideration of ever doing sports professionally or really after high school. But as you sort of, as I started training more and I got a little bit faster and better, people started mentioning University of Illinois. And I was like, why would anyone from the East Coast ever want to go to the middle of nowhere, Illinois, and go to the cornfields, because there's literally nothing there. However, when I went out to visit Illinois, I went to a track camp that they have for younger athletes. I think I went my sophomore year. The sophomore year going into my junior year, and I was like, wow, this is awesome. This is an incredible opportunity. And so I kind of made it my goal to make it to get into the University of Illinois. And then from there, I sort of kind of had aspirations of one day making a Paralympic team. So fast forward to 2012, I made the 2012 London Paralympic team. I thought that was going to be sort of it for me in terms of sports. But I did okay there. I did enough that I was like, oh, there's still some potential there. So let me go continue my education, get a master's degree, and see what happens there. And so I got a master's degree through U of I, and then was training for 2016, and made the 2016 team as well. Did better in 2016 than I did in 2012, and so figured I'd give it one more go, hopefully maybe for 2020. And now that obviously got postponed, so we're sort of fast forwarding that a little bit.
I got a question for you. Coach McLaughlin has this knack of finding something special in athletes. And, what do you think he found in you that made him go up to you and say, hey, this guy's going to be on my team? And B, on that first day when you went home and you told your parents and your siblings, hey, guess what? I'm going to be on the track team. What was the reaction? I mean,
so I think now knowing Coach McLaughlin, like that's just his personality. Like he really has no qualms about just sort of going up and saying what's on his mind or whatever. So I think he just saw someone who was in a wheelchair and was like, oh, this would be kind of cool to do. And so he just sort of asked, and I think he really had no sort of he didn't really think anything of that question. And every time I tell this story, I mean, everyone sort of gets a chuckle when I'm like, dude, I just told you I can't walk. Because most people, when I would say like I can't walk, they wouldn't ask me to join a track team. So that just sort of speaks to him and his desire to sort of make sure that, the track team at Notre Dame was incredible because it was so inclusive. They really encouraged, beginner athletes, people who had never run before or thrown before, or even, the experienced, more experienced athletes who had, were using it as either the main sport that they did or using it in between sports seasons. And so they really created this like family environment. And so that was something that, I think was really important to him. And so having someone who had a disability, who had never done any kind of athletics before, wasn't too far out of the norm for kind of that really inclusive environments that he worked to build at Notre Dame. And so I think that for him, that sort of was kind of his experience. I vividly remember coming home from high school that first day, and my sisters and my mom we were in the kitchen. I was like, yeah, so this guy asked me to come out for the track team, and I told him I would. And there sort of was this incredulous look, and there was actually laughter from my sisters, because seriously, like, I was not an athletic person at all. And I know that I really didn't really think I was going to do it past my freshman year. I was like, I kind of said yes to this, not knowing what I was getting myself involved in. And I was like, I'll just do it because I said I would, but I was never going to like do anything with sports. And so, yeah, my sisters were laughing at me, and I think they probably made bets about like when I was going to stop, because I 100% was not, if you looked at me back then, I was like, I wasn't going to make it.
That's interesting. Victor, or should I say commissioner, am I allowed to say Victor? Does this sound at all familiar, how you got into your sport? Or tell us, like, the first time you knew you wanted to do sports.
Victor's fine. Well, I grew up playing sports in the streets of Queens. You name it, touch football, sewer cap to sewer cap, baseball, stoop ball baseball, you name it, I did it. And I was always an athlete. And then when I was injured, I was like, oh my God, I'll never play hockey again. And picked up a magazine called Sports and Spokes. It's like Disabled Athletes Sports Illustrated, and saw that there was something there. And it kind of couldn't make sense of it because there wasn't a picture of sled hockey. You just read about it. It's like, you're sitting down, 2 blades underneath you, 2 hockey sticks, propelling yourself. How's that all work? And then I met someone named Billy Lear. Billy Lear was a person selling wheelchairs in New York City, and he had a pulse on all adaptive sports. He told me, you need to get in touch with this guy out on Long Island, Tony Fitzgerald, and he plays a sport called sled hockey. I was like, all right. So I immediately called Tony, and him and I connected, and sled hockey was just there. And I thought it was something that was just something to do for recreation. And I picked it up relatively quick. And all of a sudden, we're just playing around. And one day, someone's coming in from the national team. And I'm like, from the national team? What does that really mean? And it was these 2 guys named Kip St. Germain from Boston and Dave Conklin, which I like to call the grandfather of sled hockey, from Wisconsin. And they skated circles around us. And I was like, oh, my God, this is a whole other level of sport. And lo and behold, they just kept practicing and got as much ice time, which wasn't easy in New York City to find ice time back in the 90s, because there wasn't too many hockey rinks. So you had to travel all over the place, and made trips up and down the East Coast in my car to play wherever we could. I remember driving 6 hours of hockey. I was driving 6 hours to play 2 hours of hockey and turn around and drive another 6 hours to get back to a wedding, just because I wanted to play for the next day. So I was really committed to the sport. Now, sled hockey, from the work that the 1998 team did of really just trying to grow the sport, the USA sled hockey team is a powerhouse. But it all happened literally by accident. And being an athlete and then realizing the disabled sport was an option really was, to me at that particular time, was amazing. And I think Brian could say this as well. The reality is that when you're disabled, you really don't think there's an option to play at that level. And when you're sitting there hearing your national anthem and about to participate in your sport, it's quite fun. It's quite an experience that is really hard to replicate.
I mean, it's really amazing you guys have been able to take it to the next level. But just taking it a step back, Brian, you're at your first track practice. What does Coach McLaughlin ask you to do. And, you said you weren't an athlete and you had to think this was crazy at that point, getting on the track, surrounded by all of these athletes that know they're going to be runners. And you're like, where am I?
Yes, pretty much. So the first day of practice, I also remember, mainly because at that point I had yet to go train with my other team. So I didn't really know, we didn't know what I was doing, but Coach McLaughlin, his entire philosophy was like, I'm a member of the team. I do the team's workout. So I was just, we always would do, I'm going to get the numbers wrong now, but I think we always do like our like mile warm up. And then we do like 3 laps of, I think we used to call them flyouts. Rodney can correct me on that if I was, but yeah, we would do like flies essentially, which are like mini accelerations. And it was just like, all right, go figure it out. And so I was just out there with the team. And so it was one of those sort of experiences where it was just, I was sort of just thrust into being a member of the team. I didn't go very fast, nor did I manage to control my chair very well. So I spent a lot of time trying to correct with my steering cylinder. And so that was not very fun, but I don't know, that was the most exercise I had done my entire life up to that point. So that's just sort of the experience was rain or shine. I was out there with the team. I was out there in the freezing cold when it was for winter track season, because we didn't know about like rollers. So those are like our stationary trainers that we can attach our racing chairs to. So it was just kind of like I was out there doing what they were doing. And the times that anyone on the team would, if like the distance guys were going out on the road or the trails, I didn't do that yet. And so I would just do the mileage on the track instead. And so it was, whatever they did, I did.
I mean, you had to be pretty determined I remember my first practice, the coach set me out for 4 miles. Here you are, you haven't done anything. And you see the guys go out for a run and you were motivated enough to do it on the track. That's kind of crazy, don't you think?
I think because I didn't know about any alternative. So I had said yes to this opportunity and I wanted to take advantage of the opportunity. But I wasn't aware of sort of everything that I am now about, I definitely didn't have sort of the road awareness to train on the roads. And now most of the time, if we're not doing track workouts, we're training out on the roads here in Illinois. And so there's no awareness about that stuff. So there really wasn't an option. It was, if I wanted to be a member of this team, I had to do that. And so that was, there were days that were, not fun. There were days that were very windy. And so when you're trying to do, anywhere from like 8 to 10 miles on the track, and you're always going to have a headwind at like one or two sections on the track, it's going to be challenging. But that was just, I don't know. I think I didn't really think much of it because I was a part of the team and that's what the team was doing. And so that's what I had to do.
Okay, Victor, I didn't forget about you. I want to take it back to the question. You come back home and now you got to tell your parents and friends you're going out for the team. What was the response? And how did you, it's not an easy sport just to find ice time. How did you convince your parents that this is what you were going to do, and you had to get their support also?
Well, I got hurt. I was hurt when I was 22 years old. So no need for asking permission on any of that. I was just driven. I think it's part of who I was, and they saw that and just supported me everywhere that they could. And my sister did a lot because when I first got hurt, it took me a while to get my license, and she did a lot to drive me back and forth to get the ice time back everywhere I could. And so they saw the drive and commitment. It was certainly there, and that's what happens. Brian said it right. Once he saw it, he practiced and he practiced and he practices like an athlete. It doesn't make a difference if you're disabled or not. The commitment is there, and your drive is there. Lou, you drive people, you know what it's like, and you can point out that talent right away. That's what makes you Lou Vasquez.
Thanks, Victor. I'm the one asking the questions, not you. But anyway, Victor, now, and Brian, both of yous, you're getting through high school and you realize, when did you realize, like, I could take this to the next level? Like, I can be really good, and maybe I can take it to become an Olympian, Paralympian.
For me, so it was, I think, honestly, I want to say the summer of maybe my junior to senior year was when I really started. I knew I wanted to go to University of Illinois, but at that point, that was sort of the first step. And then the next step was, I was like, oh, maybe the Paralympics are something that I could do, or at least try. I didn't really know if it was possible. But I was like, that was sort of always my goal, was just make a Paralympic team. There was never anything about medaling or making a final, things like that. I just wanted to be able to say I was a member of Team USA. And so I think it was really the summer of my junior year to senior year, I actually started working out I would do workouts in the morning, but then I would do a second session in the evening. And my distance coach, Rodney DeRay, would actually come, and sometimes he would come to the track with me and run a second workout with me. And so, or he would send me a workout to do. And so that sort of was my kind of commitment and sort of the first realization that I had about, okay, if I want to do this, I have to take this seriously. And I also have to be willing to put in the work. I was trying to play catch up for all of the lost years of time that I had spent not racing up until that point. And so it was, I felt like if I put more miles in, that I would be able to, get caught up. And so, so that was sort of the big sort of when I really started to notice results. And then it was once I got to Illinois, training in an environment with, the best athletes in the world, all in one location. We're all pushing each other, training with each other. That really sort of helped guide me and showed me what I needed to do to really make that team.
And Victor?
As far as what?
When you knew your goal was, make the Paralympics, go to Japan, when you were going to take it to the next level, when did that really kick in for you?
I think I guess when I saw that the sport can go to the other level, when I saw other the USA team members come to us, and realizing that, wow, there's a level here and it's real, and seeing that, and then just practicing and the competition, and competition is tough, right? And a lot of it is mental, seeing the player that's in front of you, going through every drill, seeing who you're better, measuring yourself against someone. You fumble, you don't fumble. I mean, those are part of an athlete's psyche, and trying to figure that out was tough. But I would say, when I saw the people from the national team, and then secondly, as I started to make my way through the camps, making my way through the national camps, going to Sweden, heading to England, traveling the world, and then just being like, this is a place I want to be. I got to get to this level. And I think it's cumulative to a point. And I mean, you progress, you compete, and then it's just the drive that gets you there. So it's a progression.
It's got to be a thrill. You get selected for the team. You're at the location. You're getting ready for opening ceremonies. The two of you, what's going through your mind?
So for me, my first games experience, so being named to the team, we were in Indianapolis for the 2012 team selection, and my sisters and a couple of my friends from Illinois actually came out as well. And so I remember the entire team, just the Team USA members were just sort of in this room, and our high performance director was just kind of like going down the list, and you started to realize that it was alphabetical, the way that were naming everyone. And so of course I have this like pit in my stomach waiting for my name hopefully to be called. And so I still remember, just after I was named, it was just probably one of the most exciting moments of my life. And even in 2016 as well, it never gets old hearing your name be called to be able to represent Team USA. And so it's something that you don't forget, and it's also something that I'm hoping to hear again in 2021 for Tokyo. And then even just the entire games experience is incredible, and opening ceremonies is this massive sort of event. And a lot of what people don't see is sort of the behind the scenes stuff of, for Team USA to march out. We actually, all the countries sort of line up, and they do it. They also do that in alphabetical order. And so we're almost last essentially. And so it was, we waited outside for close to 3 hours before Team USA was able to march into the stadium in London. But like, they say in the United States of America, and then they usually set off these like fireworks and everything. And it seriously is the most exciting and sort of jaw-dropping experience, where you're able to proudly walk out with every other member of Team USA, and to walk or push behind the flag and say that, you're there to represent your country, which is really, really incredible.
Yeah, I'd have to say it is. It's exhilarating. Just imagine you're lining up with thousands of athletes from all over the world, about to experiencing an opening ceremony, and the second you go into the arena, there's could be thousands and thousands and thousands of people just cheering you on, and you feel exactly like an athlete, the way that an athlete, regardless of disability or not, is supposed to be treated. And it's unforgettable. It is one of the greatest experiences of my life. And I'm quite jealous of Brian, because he's still got a lot of, a couple more Paralympics in him. Whereas I'm done. All I can do is hope that the kids that I lead forward here in New York City, through many different sports, could experience that and realize that I was the one that was able to help them just a little bit get to where they need to be.
I mean, you two are amazing. I just don't want you to think that, I didn't experience the Olympic moment, but I did carry the Olympic torch in New York City, into New York City, and part of the Atlanta Olympics, and my anchor leg on the team happened to be Muhammad Ali. So I do have a little, it was probably one of the most thrilling things that I had done, but that's the closest I've gotten. But Brian, I noticed in your profile, you placed really well in the 100. I think it was 6th place. It looked like you also did the 800. And what in the world possessed you to then go out and do the marathon? Was it a dare? What's her name? Because nobody goes from the 100 to the marathon. You look at somebody like Usain Bolt, he runs the 100, 200, and the 400's like a marathon. Here you did the 100, the 800, and you do the marathon. That just doesn't jive with me.
Yeah, so I get asked that question a lot. My main focused events for the games are the sprints. Primarily the 400 and 800. I throw the 100 in just because. But the 800 really is my main medal potential event. I kind of have a joke now where I say I'm a gold medalist at getting 4th place in the 800, because I've done that. I've gotten 4th place in the 800 at both the Rio Paralympics and then our most recent World Championships by like 100th of a second. So like I'm like right there. So that's always fun. But yeah, no. So I focus on the sprints. Those are my main sort of events. But part of our training always does involve longer distance running, and so I do marathons. I enjoy marathons. I've run the New York City Marathon since 2000 and 2012, I think 2013 maybe was my first New York. So I've been doing it every year. I love coming back to New York. But so I ended up, I always choose to do the marathon if I can at the games, mainly because it's the last event. So I can do marathons, I enjoy them, and it's sort of an opportunity to get like a really nice long run in, and just a good race with a bunch of other athletes from around the world. And so it's something that when I'm doing my training, my coach and I have this agreement where he'll let me do it if I qualify for it, but none of my training is focused on it once we get to the games. And so I sort of go in, not with a very good distance-based foundation, but, to focus on the marathon. But, I can still, our training involves such high volume anyway that I could theoretically just go out and do pretty well in the marathon.
There's very few people that can actually say that I could just go out and do a marathon. So
yeah, and
there's definitely something wrong with you. Okay, just so you know.
I think a little bit in the head, yeah. Physically, wheelchair racing with like the biomechanics of wheelchair racing, it's not as much pressure and like stress and impact on our body, and so we theoretically could get up and do it. It's not like an ambulatory runner with that impact of their feet hitting the ground all the time, and so so we can theoretically do it if we have the training. And so, but yeah, mentally, you're right that there's something off with wanting to just add on a marathon just for fun.
Absolutely. Both of you are role models. What can you tell younger athletes, younger students, that this is possible, you should do it? What reaching out, they're like you guys, maybe have never had any experience or even the thought that they could get involved in sports. What can both of you tell them?
You want to go, Victor, first?
Brian, what? All right. So I think what's important to get young people to understand that sport, what they can do for them, is ensuring that it's there. And in New York City, for a long time, disabled sport was only for older guys in wheelchairs, really. When I first came on the scene, there wasn't much commitment to adaptive sport in the New York City area for youth. And the New York City Parks Department, Achilles Track Club, New York Roadrunners, Wheelchair Sports Federation, which is one of the founders of disabled sport in New York City, have made a huge commitment to ensuring that kids with disabilities have those opportunities. There's wheelchair basketball now, there's sled hockey, there's wheelchair football that people are getting into, kids' wheelchair basketball teams, the racing teams, and they're all encouraging youth to come out. We have over 250,000 kids that identify with an individual education plan in New York City. So it means they have some type of need. So the athlete reach is huge in disabled sport. So we just have to make sure that we have programming throughout the 5 boroughs that can meet the kids' needs. And it could be lots of different sports. It could be bocce. It could be wheelchair racing. It could be track and field or sled hockey and basketball and hand cycling. But these programs need to exist. So I think establishing good programming throughout the city. B, making sure that we can reach those athletes within the Department of Education and broader than that within private schools as well. Getting a lot of press, making sure that coaches know that athletes are athletes regardless of disability. And then making sure that we have role models, people like Brian that are out there, Paralympians that are out there, people that have had national competition, to be able to engage these kids and show them what the possibility is. Because not only does sport give you camaraderie, it gives you confidence, it also gives you an opportunity to go to school. And some kids within our inner cities need that opportunity and don't have that. And with scholarships now, throughout schools and adaptive programs starting in colleges, this is the opportunity for them to realize that it's bigger than just playing around with your friends. There is competition. You can go far, and as long as it's there and we can reach out to people, that's important.
Yeah, and I would agree with everything Victor said. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I had never seen someone with a disability in any form of media before, doing athletics and being successful at it. And it was, I just happened to luck into a situation where I was able to get involved in sports. But had I not been asked that first day of high school, if I wanted to join the track team, I certainly would not have pursued that avenue myself, because I didn't really even think it was possible. And I think that the unique thing about sports are that it really does transcend so many barriers, whether they're, social or even physical barriers that people have. So I think that really it allows people, it changes the perceptions of what people think are possible, and even more so for people with disabilities to change others' perceptions and attitudes about people with disabilities. Getting involved in sports changed the trajectory of my life, in that I had never considered doing sports. I had never considered going to school outside of New Jersey. And now I'm living in Illinois. I was able to have, my tuition paid for. I was able to represent the United States and travel the world. And so while those are all great opportunities, you don't have to be involved in sports and aspire to that. Getting involved in sports leads to so many more just physical and mental health benefits for anyone who's involved. And we really need to make sure that all kids know that these opportunities exist, and to continue to provide opportunities for kids with disabilities, so that they're able to participate and engage, and then to really understand what it means to be active and to have the experiences of being part of a team, because those really help shape your experiences and sort of how you will continue to proceed through the rest of your life.
Me as a meet director, I put on a lot of these events on track and field. We're finally starting to get in the state championship, para athletes competing. And as a meet director, you worry about the safety of not only athletes in general, but in this case, how can you make everything work? And Victor worked me through the first event I ever did. I've always leaned on him for advice, how to handle it the right way. And I always struggle with the question of, is this athlete, should he be competing in the event with other able athletes, or would they rather compete by themselves or with another para athlete? And you kind of struggle because you're always concerned about the safety of athletes. What advice would you give me as a meet director?
Go ahead, Brian, you're up first.
I would say I think it's important that it's the fact that you're thinking about it and engaging in conversations is probably the most important thing you can do. For me, that was something we at Notre Dame and my coaches, we sort of figured out as we went. And so because no one had in my area had any sort of experience with an athlete with a disability before competing on the track. And for Coach McLaughlin and Coach Duray, it was really important that I was racing alongside my teammates because I was a member of the team. And so we figured out ways to make it work. There were conversations that were had about, okay, what's the safest way that we can include Brian in this race so he's not racing alone? I think if there are other athletes with disabilities there at the meet, I also think that's important for them to be racing with each other as well, because they are, in the same sort of category of competition with each other. And so I think that's an interesting dynamic. And as more kids hopefully start to get involved in sports at their, grade school and high school levels, hopefully there is more participation. So it is something where there can be, there can be larger fields where they can race each other.
Yeah, absolutely right. Getting more and more kids with disabilities out is important. And secondly, it's just about asking an athlete, asking the person with the disability what they prefer, and I don't think they'll be shy on telling you what they need.
Well, thank you both for that answer. Like I said, it's always a learning experience, and you want to try, for any athlete that is coming to do your event, you want to try as a meet director to give them the best experience possible. And I always thank Victor when we did the first event at Icon Stadium at New York Relays. He not only gave me a good experience that day, we also gave the kids that were competing that day a really big experience and a great experience. Goals. You guys must have some goals. And I'm going to start with Victor on this one. He went from, me and him hanging out, and now he's climbed the chain in New York City. Unbelievable. Becoming one of the commissioners, really pushing his agenda, and he's made it his life goal, I guess, to push his agenda. Where do you go from here?
First of all, thank you, Lou, for everything, and thank you for your continued support of people with disabilities. I think we are at a lot of crossroads here in America. People are fighting for equality, either through protesting, either through advocacy. But I think one of the biggest things that we have in front of us right now is the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And far too long, institutions have failed people with disabilities, not including them in sports, not providing the accessibility that they need to get in and out of places, not having the proper health care. I think where we go from here is to push hard for the ADA, for full equality for people with disabilities. And, that's something that I've committed my life to. I'm about to, in about a year and a half, I'm onto some new ventures. Not sure what they are, but it's, it's always going to have the thoughts and will to push accessibility. So we go from here is advocating more and more for ADA, so we have accessibility, and we have a true equality through everything that our city and our country has to offer.
Thank you, Victor. Brian, what are your goals? My goals are very much in a similar vein as Victor's is too. I want to increase opportunities for kids with disabilities. I think I look back at my own experience and how I started later in life, and how I almost wish I had had the opportunity to be a part of a team, to be with other kids with disabilities when I was younger. And so, but I just wasn't aware of what those resources were. And so if I can get involved in programs like the New York Roadrunners, their youth wheelchair program, and sort of be a mentor to younger kids and to help them as they continue to progress in their journey of being involved in sports, but also just to try and make the experience for the next generation better than the one that we had currently. And so if I can be a part of a movement where there are more opportunities, more visibility, more chances for kids with disabilities to get involved in sports at whatever level they can, that's something that is really important to me.
Well, the New York Roadrunner event, just so you know, they actually do 8 weeks of training at Icon Stadium. And I was fortunate enough to be there on day one when they came in, and it was amazing to see the coaches that was so patient. And the first day was just getting them from their regular wheelchair into their racing wheelchair, and then coming back 6 weeks later and seeing how much they've accomplished in that short period of time. and hearing their stories and listening to them. And this was, for a lot of them, the highlight of being in school for a week. And now all of a sudden, and the Roadrunners Club actually brings them and they do a race when they're ready after this 8-week program. And you talk about changing kids' lives. I mean, that's what that program did. So the fact that you want to be part of it would be amazing for those kids.
Yeah, it's incredible. I'm actually going to be what am I doing on Saturday? I'm doing one of their virtual Zoom sessions with them. So we're going to do some at home sort of workouts and stuff so that they can, with everything going on right now, it's been hard, especially if you don't have the stuff. And so a lot of my Team USA teammates, we've been kind of going in and talking to the kids. And so I'm going to do it this week with my teammate, Amanda.
Excellent. I see at this point, I've done a lot of talking. I'm going to open it up to questions I see Amanda's on there and Rodney and Lauren. I cut her off again. She probably has some questions. Once they got me talking, I kind of don't stop. I just keep rolling. So if any of you guys have questions, just hop on in there.
I have a question. So this is probably geared a little bit more towards Victor, but Brian, feel free to jump in as well. At Ocean Breeze, I'm not gonna hide the fact that we have been struggling to get adaptive sports off the ground. We had a 2-hour meeting with my staff today about adaptive sports, and it's something that I truly want to see happening. There's 2 things that I think is holding us back a little bit. I think I have some of my staff members who are basically our coaches to our youth track team, and they seem to be scared to really take on an athlete that has a disability. That's one thing. And then the second thing that I think I'm seeing a lot is, what advice would you give to parents? Because I think a lot of parents are scared to let go. We try to say to them, it's okay if they fall down. It's okay if, we push them outside of their comfort area. But what advice would you give to parents and to coaches who just might be scared to let their kids go and jump into sports and just, give it a try?
Well, I think for a lot of parents, having a kid with a disability and not understanding that the kid is not as fragile as they think they are is tough. So trying to find some kids that are already in programs to act as role models so they can see that. But it takes a while to kind of happen, right? And you got to be patient with it. Finding and growing adaptive sport anywhere is not easy. And parents are a lot of times hold kids back. I've seen where we've had great kids that potential to be great Paralympians. And what happens is the parents hold them back. And there's only so much you can do, but having some kids to show them where some successes, pulling other kids in from other programs that could show them and be role models is helpful. So, and continuing to educate them and showing them types of videos and shares and educating them about the child's disability certainly helps. And as far as getting staff, people are scared of the things they don't know. And once you get them familiar over time, training, my office does some training, be happy to do some disability etiquette training with some of your staff members. And just continuing to show them videos and having other athletes come in. And over time, those barriers are broken down.
Sounds good. Yeah, we'll definitely take you up on that training.
I think one of the biggest, that's probably the biggest barrier, is to getting kids involved in sports if they happen to have a disability, is that there is so much unknown about it, and that there's a fear of the unknown. And so I think that one of the things you could do is there are successful models of inclusion across the country. This is not a new phenomenon that all of a sudden that there isn't a model to follow. And so, I mean, I use my own example as my own experience as an example, that we had no idea what we were doing. I was the first athlete in the area, and it was because my coach took a risk and was willing to sort of figure it out. And so there is no handbook. Everyone who has a disability, they have a different experience. They have a different level of function that has to be considered as well. But that doesn't make it impossible. You just have to be willing to have those conversations and be willing to think outside of what you consider, normal. There are models out there that can be followed to get more people involved. And then, like Victor was saying, I think that if you bring in athletes, you bring in other people that have gone through this already, where they can share their experience and sort of brainstorm ideas. I think that's something where you're able to then sort of ease some of those concerns as well.
And if parents wanted to get more information, where's the best place to send them?
Well, it could be different places. There's certainly our websites, U.S. Paralympics, and USA Olympic Paralympics could certainly be a resource. Roadrunners are a resource. Achilles Track Club is a resource. New York City Department of Parks and Recreation is a resource. Wheelchair Sports Federation, the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. That's just in New York City alone. Are rich in resources, and there are some good adaptive sports coaches and therapists in the Department of Education. So those are some of the resources.
Yeah, I think that we live in a super connected age now. I mean, even when I was in high school, Facebook was not really a thing in terms of connecting people. And so, pretty much everyone has some kind of organization, has some kind of Facebook page that you can also reach out to in terms of trying to find adaptive athletics programs. I know that it is challenging, even for me. I lived in Central Jersey, but the closest program was an hour and a half away from my house. And so that's also a barrier sometimes about inclusion. But I mean, if anything that COVID has sort of taught everyone is that we all now have these like virtual Zoom workouts and things like that there are ways to connect and engage with these teams, to ask questions, to participate, to stay active and healthy, that, are different from sort of what we would traditionally, be used to.
Sounds good. I'm done now.
Amanda, Rodney, you guys have any questions?
Yeah. Hey, thanks, it's Rodney. So, Brian, what is your biggest, I guess, challenge in staying motivated, for the last 15 years? Is it sitting in the wet corrals in Florida or freezing? Or is it just, the snow? Like, what's the biggest challenge of staying competitive like you are?
The biggest challenge for me probably, I think, has been that's a good question, because as I've gotten older and I've done more races, I've learned to sort of appreciate the entire process and the entire experience. And so waking up early for marathons is never fun, and I always find myself thinking, why am I doing this? But I also really just love the experience of working out and that feeling of doing something good for my body. That motivates me more than anything. Just the physical wellness that comes from being active. And it's an added bonus that I happen to be, pretty good at the sport, so I can compete internationally and do all of that stuff. And I think the challenge sometimes might just be when you get at this level of competition, sometimes you don't see gains as quickly as you're sort of as you would when you were first getting better. And so it's staying positive and trying to focus on the things you can control, and not focusing on that, you're not making these big jumps like you used to. And so trying to keep a positive mental sort of attitude is probably my most challenging thing, because I can very quickly just sort of say, oh, well, I'm not improving, this sucks. And, and then just be in that kind of bad mental rut for a while. And I also feel that way when it's, 3 a.m. and freezing cold and raining in corrals.